I don't want to be spoon-fed. Oh my gosh, I think I just saw a squirrel. That scared me so much. Welcome to the reader's profile tag. Thank you for tagging me, Elmo. I am excited to actually do some just regular booktube content. I have my notes and my tea. And obviously I have my mascot. First question is for you. What makes a good book? I always struggle to answer these kinds of questions because I feel like every book has a mixture of elements that make it good or bad, and there's not one thing that might make a book good in one context might not necessarily make it the good book in another context, and I think it would be easier to tell you what makes a bad book than a good book, but I'm going to give it a go. A robust world, where the world feels real to me. It's like tangible, it makes sense to me, I can imagine being in that world. Realistic characters with thought out personalities and flaws that you can actually relate to. A realistic plot. Now, I don't mean that I'm disregarding all fantasy, sci-fi, magic. I love all that stuff, but the plot has to make sense, right? So we're not talking, oh, that doesn't happen in the real world, so it doesn't make sense. I'm meaning more people doing stuff that they just wouldn't do. Not that I've got anything in particular in mind, but you would not find in the real world, or it's not logical for say the FBI to just pick a random teenager out of high school because she fell into the situation, have her run point on a completely very delicate, dangerous situation, have her go in without backup, have her be able to suddenly decide she knows better than all of the FBI agents, do whatever she wants and get no consequences for it. Not that I'm thinking of any book in particular. A respect for the reader's intelligence. Like, if you've told me something a few pages before, I got it, I'm good. You don't have to re-explain it to me in a second or consistently just explain exposition. Like, just immerse me in the world. There was some books that I've struggled to read because they just, for this particular issue that I have, it's quite often that the narrator is the main character and it's all happening in their own heads, and they're just describing everything. And I just don't see how that could be the case, because imagine if we went through the world inside our own internal monologue, because that's how I imagine first person narration would be. You are hearing the person's inner monologue. Obviously you do have to add little bits here and there for exposition for us to understand the world, but you do not go around your day looking at stuff happening and explaining why it's happening to yourself, because that's what inner monologue is. If the first person narrator is telling us a story as they experience it, they're not telling us the story, they're telling themselves. It's the thoughts that they have. I don't know, sometimes it just feels like we're just being talked down to, and it's like we can't figure stuff out for ourselves, and it does put me off. Question 2, what are you currently reading? And I would normally be reading quite a lot of things, but I have got it down to 2. The first book that I'm currently reading is Duncton Wood, and I have been reading it since last year. I'm currently in part 3, so, which doesn't look like I'm in part 3 because it looks like it's only halfway, but it's just over halfway, and I'm going to try and give you a little bit of a better description of the plot than I did in my vlog. So we're set in the English countryside in a wood. The main moles that we are following live in Duncton Wood, in the Duncton, what's the word? System. The Duncton system. But we're following mainly a couple of characters. We've got Bracken, which is our main boy, Rebecca, who is the daughter of Mandrake, who came to Duncton Wood from a different system, and he's huge and a bully and murders and kills loads of people. There's and Rune. I think he's probably what I would class as our 4th main protagonist. So Rune is kind of like that guy from Lord of the Rings that was sent by Saruman to poison the mind of the King of Rohan. You know the guy? That guy. I imagine him to be like that guy. He's evil. Not a nice guy. We don't like him at all. There's other systems around Duncton Wood, but Duncton Wood seems to be the centre of something that's gonna happen, right? So Bracken, our main lad, seems to have some sort of Frodo energy. He's gonna be going out, sorting things out. He was the son of somebody that I've forgotten. He was like the runt of the litter, you know, wasn't really cared about. His brothers picked on him, and he eventually just decided, screw this, I'm gonna leave the system, and he did. And he just kind of wandered off, because they don't really leave the system these days with with Mandrake in charge. Things used to be different, but mole generations get passed through so quickly, they've kind of forgotten all of their history so quickly. It reminds me of that episode of Doctor Who, where the Doctor's daughter, where they went through like generations of generations and they were at war, and it turns out it had only been a few days and they thought it had been years of this war. Again, off track. And they worship this thing called the stone, but Mandrake has basically decided that we're not going to have any of those traditions anymore. He's not let anybody go and celebrate the stone on the longest night, and the stone is meant to protect them, and they pray to the stone, and it is actually a physical stone. You can go there. It sits above the what they call the ancient system, which runs underneath, which has not been touched for however many mole generations. I don't really know how many. So Duncton Wood does actually link up to the ancient system, which Bracken finds out. So eventually Bracken works his way into the ancient system, lives in it by himself, explores it, knows it like the back of his hand. Yeah, it's kind of difficult to explain what the plot actually is so far. There's been a lot of, as I said in the previous one, lots of mating, lots of generations, there's been a couple fights, there's been a lot of murder, a lot of subterfuge, I think. Well, Rune is trying to take over from Mandrake, and all of this is going on, and I feel like Bracken has some sort of higher purpose, and Rebecca is in there somehow. I haven't done a better job. I have not done a better job of explaining this. I'm still invested, regardless. The second book that I'm reading currently is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. So I've been reading Brandon Sanderson books in publication order because I'm interested to see how his writing style progresses, or how his worlds get more solid, because his first one's pretty good, to be honest. I've currently read Elantris and the 3 Mistborn books, which I can't remember the names of, so I will read them to you one second. We've got The Final Empire, The Well of Ascension, and The Hero of Ages. So that is 4. This one is my 5th. So far, if I could describe what's been going on, we have this world where the magic system revolves around colour and breath. So there's these people who are called returned. So they've died and then suddenly they returned. But if you are a returned, you cannot live longer than a week unless you are given somebody else's breath. If someone gives their breath, they don't die, they just kind of become dull. I feel like it has like a soul kind of vibe. You can hold a lot of breaths, but breaths can't be taken, breaths have to be given. There's a city with a load of returned gods. They are revered as gods and they have their own priests, but basically they're just returned, and every week they have to have a feast day where they have to be presented with somebody, and that person from the city has to willingly give their breath, and the god will continue living for another week, which is quite atrocious. And in this city there is somebody called the God King, and the God King is an interesting kind of guy. He was born stillborn and then returned, so he was apparently chosen to be the God King from within the womb, like pre-birth, and he wants to marry. He is apparently the only returned who can bear children. So that's that section of the world done. Oh no, it's not. No, it's not. There's also awakeners. Awakeners can use the breath that they hold to animate a human-esque looking item. So for example, in the very first chapter, this isn't a spoiler, Vasha uses straw to make like a little like voodoo doll version of a little person, and then uses his breath to animate it and gives it a command which finishes the animation or awakening of the little figure. He gives it a command to go and do a thing for him, and it goes and does it. He has a cloak that he has cut and ripped and stuff, and it looks kind of like a person if you lay it down on the ground, and he awakens that with breath and gives it the command to protect him. Stuff like that. And awakeners, you can tell who the awakeners are because the colours around them start to be a bit more vivid, and the more breaths you hold, the more vivid. So that's all happening around in Hallandren. In the mountains there is living the royal family. They fled Hallandren to the mountains because they didn't like what was going on in Hallandren with the God King and the Returned and the Awakeners. The royal family are interesting because their hair colour changes based on their emotions, which I think is really cool. And the God King wants to sire a child from the royal lineage to get royal blood into that generational line, basically. And at one point, to stop war with Hallandren, the current king of, I want to say Idris, but I feel like that is a different book altogether, or a different story. I was right, it's Idris. So the current king of Idris made a treaty that said that when his firstborn daughter was of age, he would send his daughter to Hallandren to marry the God King. It's now got to the point where poor Vivenna is 22, I think is the of age classification in Idris. We've initially started to follow Ciri, which is the youngest daughter. She ends up being sent in Vivenna's stead. So Vivenna has been trained for this her whole life. She is completely prepared in her own mind to go and marry the God King. She kind of hopes that she might be able to be on the within the court and make some change for the people and make some real difference, but in the end the king, finding a loophole, decides that he doesn't have to send Vivenna because he thinks that Vivenna would be better serving his own people back in Idris. He sends Ciri, and Ciri is the rebellious youngest daughter who's always deemed herself irrelevant. So at the point I've got in the book, which is at not too far, 100 pages or so, poor little Ciri has been sent off to marry the God King. Question 3 is, what is the last book you did not finish and why was that? So there's so many books that I haven't finished. I tend to forget about them, as I do most things. My little ADHD brain just drops them off of a cliff and that's it, they're done for. So the only one that I haven't finished recently that I have a physical copy of is Little Women, Louise May Alcott. And I was meant to be buddy reading this with my friend Chloe. I read the first chapter, was absolutely in love, and then just didn't pick it up again. It's not the fault of the book, it was wonderful. I just got distracted. This one I will finish. Other ones that I've got written down is Unmasked by Ellie Middleton. That's about ADHD and autism and stuff like that. Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdaal, and I have to say I also stopped reading 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. The reason I stopped reading the self-help books and the non-fiction books was that I realised that I hadn't been reading any fiction and I was stuffing self-help books down my throat like it was gonna just fix me. It's not going to. I just need to be able to try and balance things. I'm always like 100% in one direction or nothing at all. I hadn't been reading any fiction. I hadn't been enjoying reading for enjoyment's sake. I've decided that I'm just gonna try and absorb art again and enjoy things again, and hopefully that'll help me be creative in return, because I really do believe that fiction and art and absorbing stuff like that is so much more healing than 10,000 self-help books could be. Question 4. Yes, question 4. What obscure book do you wish others would read? Now, I don't really know what classes as an obscure book because I have a very bad opinion or knowledge on what other people read. But there is a book that I don't think a lot of people know too much about that I read when I was a teenager and I really liked it. It was the first book that made me cry. It was one tear, but it was a tear nonetheless, and that would be Blood Sisters, and that is by Barbara and Stephanie Keating. So this is set in Kenya, which is why I have it, because I went to Kenya with school at one point in secondary school and my mum got it for me because it was set in Kenya. So we're following 3 girls. They grew up in Kenya together. They're not actual sisters but made a blood sister kind of pact situation. We follow them as their lives take them to different places around the globe and they end up living 3 very different lives, and it's about how they navigate their relationship and life over distance and over time and through different experiences. I would like to reread this actually because it's been a long time since I read this. It was when I was a teenager that I did read it. I've only read it the one time, but yeah, that was a long time ago now, and I think I would like to revisit this as an adult, especially because it's about the relationships between these 3 women, the relationship with their upbringing with their home country in relation to where they've moved to, the relationship with it between each other, and then I seem to remember really enjoying that other character. I think it's just a Kenyan man, but I think he's more tribal, I think, if I'm remembering that rightly. It does have 4.21 stars from over 2,000 reviews on Goodreads, so read Blood Sisters, guys. I'm gonna read it too, along with Little Women. Question 5. What is the longest book you have ever read? And I looked this up on Goodreads just to, because you can filter it by page count. So easy. And according to Goodreads, the longest book I have ever read is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I don't have the Order of the Phoenix. I have to say I have all of the Harry Potter books from when I was a kid, but I don't have the Order of the Phoenix, and I'm interested by that. I will have to look into that. Question 6. If you could have a dinner party with 5 fictional characters, who would you invite? I'm not really a big fan of having people over, so I reckon that we would go out, you know? And I'm probably reading far too much into the question. However, I want to set the scene. Where are we going? I think I'd like to go to, there's this restaurant in York that's my favourite one. It's called Toto's. We've been going there my whole life. It's a family-run Italian, and it's just wonderful. And we're inviting 5 people. Right. Firstly, Anne Shirley, Anne of Green Gables. She would just be a right time, right? She'd love everything about it. The restaurant itself is quite quirky. It's got an interesting building. It's really like dark and intimate, but not stuffy, and it's got lots of quirky art. It's got like cute little, well, they used to anyway, have these little oil burner candles with like a rope wick, you know, the kind that on the tables, that just a load of fun. It's nice. And then to go upstairs into the toilets and stuff, there's like a rickety little twisty staircase made like with wooden stairs, and it's just nice, you know. It's just a nice vibe, and depending on where you're sitting you can see into the kitchen, you know, all good stuff. I just feel like it's so beautiful and quaint. She'd just have so much to say about it, and she'd give everything a new name, and I would just listen. I'd be like, yes, squirrel. I'm Doug from Up. That was genuine. Then if we invite Anne, I feel like we would have to invite Luna Lovegood, just to match the energy, right? Because she'll be able to see crap that's not even there. But, well, it is there. She'll be able to see stuff that we wouldn't be able to see, and she would have insights that none of us would have. And I feel like, don't you think Luna Lovegood and Anne Shirley would be friends? I feel like they would be friends, and I would want to be their third friend. Do you know what I mean? Also, Luna Lovegood is my spirit animal, and she's the best character in Harry Potter. Fight me. Then, to complement the youth and exuberance and energy that would come with those two, I feel like the old lady from Sweet Bean Paste would just really add to that vibe. I can't remember her name, I'll put it on the screen, but I feel like she's just so down to earth, so accepting of people, because she has been through hardship and understands what it's like to not be accepted. And Anne and Luna have both been through experiences of not being accepted based off of who they are, because they are themselves, and that's not typically normal. And the lady from Sweet Bean Paste also experiences life as an outcast, as someone who is not typically normal. But I also think because she's so much older, she would absolutely love their energy, and they maybe could like learn from her. I think they would think she was wonderful. Then I think, so that she's not the only older person, I think I would want to invite the granddad from Land of Raw. Right, this is a kid's book, and it was just wonderful, and there's others in the series, and I would like to read them, and also the art is just beautiful. So it's The Land of Raw, sorry, by Jenny McLaughlin, illustrated by Ben Mantle, and the illustrations are so lovely. They have such a vibe to them, especially the ones on the cover that are coloured. The colour palette on this book is wonderful, but that's irrelevant because we're talking about the granddad in here, okay? So the story of The Land of Raw is there's these twins, and one twin is completely like trying to grow up a bit too quickly. She's trying to be like too cool. She hasn't got time for her brother anymore. but they're going to live with their granddad. I don't know what happened to their parents or what's going on, but they were going through the attic and they find this old den thing that they used to play the Land of Raw in, and they'd made a map and this and that, and they thought it was just playtime that they had as a kid, but turns out that the portal to the Land of Raw is real, and their granddad gets abducted into the Land of Raw by some sort of evil enemy, and they have to go in and save him. But the granddad is just so funny. He's hilarious. He's such a warm guy. He's not actually in the book very much because he gets kidnapped at the beginning, so he's not really around, but he left such an impression on me more than any other character in the book. I think he's really funny. He was just so warm and kind and understanding, and kind of one of those funny Billy Connolly kind of ideas, but a bit more wacky than that. Yeah, I just thought this book was lovely, so he's invited. And the last one, I wasn't quite sure how to close it off, but I think I want to invite Cussie, the bookwoman from Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, because if we're gonna have a vibe of misfits and weirdos, then she's a misfit for sure. She's not really a weirdo, but she is definitely an outcast with having blue skin. She definitely had a hard time, and I think she would really appreciate being invited out to an Italian with a group of really nice people who would include her and accept her exactly for how she is. And she's a very nice woman, and she's very well read as a librarian, so we would have a lot of book recommendations when we leave this dinner. You know what? I would really like to go to this dinner. I'm actually quite sad that it's not going to happen. Question 7. What are 5 books you would want if you were stranded on a desert island? Without a doubt, the first book would be The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I have read this twice, recommended it to anybody who I think would like it, and to people who wouldn't. I've made a video that featured it heavily. Safe to say I like this book. John has just such a wonderful way with words, and he seems to just overthink things far more than I do, and that is saying something. But it's the kind of overthinking that you can totally get behind. So this book is actually a collection of mini essays, and before you think that sounds boring and rubbish, please, it's not. It's really wonderful. He talks about the mundane things in life in a way that makes them so much bigger than they seem to be and more wonderful, or finds a way to philosophize, if that's a word, the things like air conditioning and scratch and sniff stickers, but also more deep topics. He has a whole chapter about our capacity for wonder. I think that's delightful. Camera battery change break and a cup of tea refresher. Right, let's keep going. I feel like if I were washed up on a desert island, this one would be very good at managing to keep me grounded and remember my humanity whilst trying not to go absolutely insane. I do have a feeling that being stranded on a desert island may over time push your ability to remain in a good mental health state, so I feel like I would want to bring along our good old friend Anne Shirley from Anne of Green Gables, because she is a consistent beam of optimism and reminder of the beauty and the humanity and the joy of life, which would probably be lacking on a desert island, I could imagine. If you are unaware, Anne of Green Gables is about a girl, young ginger girlie, who is an orphan and gets accidentally adopted in place of a boy. They'd wanted a boy. This brother and sister have a farm, and they wanted a boy to help with the farm work because the brother is getting older, but the asylum sends a girl, and they end up with Anne Shirley. Anne spelt with an E when you say it, please. But this young girl sees the world in such a different way to them. They are very get the job done, this is life, we get on with it, kind of working class hard people. And she is an absolute artist at heart, soul in the sky kind of person. She renames everything to be far more wonderful, and she believes herself to be a fairy princess called Cordelia, and she just brings a certain level of energy and joy into the house that they had never experienced before living alone. It's just definitely worth the hype. Anne is abundantly optimistic in the face of adversity, and I think being stranded on a desert island could be classed as adversity, so I will definitely take her as my role model and yeah, follow her lead. And I definitely think it would help keep me in good spirits and in a more stable mental health level whilst stranded on a desert island. Steamed up. Never gets old. Never gets old. Mythago Wood. Now this would be my escape from reality, forget that I'm stranded on a desert island pick. It's by Robert Holdstock and it was my favourite book in 2022, and rightly so. It's completely up my street, my cup of tea, everything that I could want. It marries the English countryside and woodland with philosophical ideals and ideas and spiritual elements, and I just think that's just, it's wonderful. It's such an interesting concept to like grip into. I love breaking apart the reasons for things, where things came from, philosophical ideas, why, what's going on, you know, let's pick it apart, let's do it. And this book, it does that. The world that Robert Holdstock has created within Mythago Wood is so close. That's probably the best word that I can use to describe it. It's small but vast, but it's not that word, it's the word is close. When the weather feels like you can touch it, it's like that, but in a book. I don't really want to spoil the concept, but there is like spiritually philosophical myths and stuff and origins of things, and it's definitely one that I really think you should read. It just took a load of things that I really like and mashed them into a book. This one I've read a couple times as well. I've listened to it once and read it once physically, and it's The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I think I read it at the right time for me personally. I haven't necessarily always had the best mental health but this one it was just very soothing, and it pointed out a lot of things that I was feeling and explored ways to heal them. If you haven't read it, our main character Nora, she finds herself in the Midnight Library. Time has stopped still. Every single book she can see in the library that seems to go on forever is a different version of her life that could have happened if she'd made a different decision. Now, a lot of people do think this book is bad, and I can see where they're coming from if they were trying to read it as if it were an expression of depression, whereas I think it's more an exploration of regret and accepting things that shoulda, coulda, woulda in our lives, you know what I mean? So I can definitely see how this book might be disappointing if you were going into it expecting it to be an exploration of depression, especially if you've experienced depression. You can get so bogged down on wondering whether you've made the wrong decision, wondering whether, oh, if you just did that it would have been better, and you can get really unhappy about that, and that can add to your depression. I think it's just one aspect that he's really explored, and I think it was just a really nice concept, and it was very easily read. Like, it was just quite comfort ready for me, and yeah, I can see why people don't like it, but I personally really enjoyed it and read it twice. This is my because I love it pick, okay? I read this as a buddy read with my friend Chloe back in 2021, and we were both in love with it. It's not too deep, but it's kind of like a nice easy read. It's light. Yeah, it's nice. That was terrible. So we're following Kate and Rosemary. Kate comes to Brixton. She wants to be a journalist. It's not going too well. Rosemary is older, has lived in Brixton her whole life, and she swims daily in the Lido. And Kate ends up going to the Lido and they meet. But then it turns out that the Lido is going to be closed down, and the plot of the book is basically Kate and Rosemary coming together. Kate hoping to write a story that will show that she's a great journalist, Rosemary hoping to save the Lido, and they both work together to prove that the Lido should be saved, and why. And it's a relationship between these two women and how they learn from each other, they grow, and whether they actually manage to achieve the goal. I've also read The Island Home by Libby Page. I don't know if I said it was by Libby Page. This is The Lido by Libby Page. It's just an all-round, easy, warm read. and sometimes you just need those, and I think it would be good to have an option for that when stranded on a desert island. Question 8. One book you could not put down. Even If This Love Disappears Tonight by Misaki Ichijo. This book isn't hugely long, it's only coming in at 233 pages, but I do remember reading it within a 24-hour period. I ordered it when Emmy from Emmy Reads read it in the 24-hour readathon she did with Carolyn, one of them. I remember she read this and cried her eyes out, and she just made it seem like it would just be really worth reading, so I just ordered it, and I would have to agree. We follow two Japanese high schoolers who end up dating out of a dare from a bully, and it turns out that the girl the guy has been dared to ask out has an illness that means that every time she goes to sleep she wakes up and does not remember the previous day. Our boy, however, is determined to have a relationship with her and really likes her, and it's the journey of that relationship blossoming even though every single day she does not remember the day before. It was really beautiful, and if you want a quick read with a lot of very intense emotions, oh my gosh, the ending, this one is definitely for you. Question 9. 5 books or authors you will never read. So I'm not really sure on this one because I would never refuse to read anything without giving it a go first. However, there are a few things that I have given a little bit of a go and probably won't try again. Colleen Hoover. I have zero interest in such things. I did actually try to start listening to the audiobook of Ends With Us a while ago, sometime last year, and after an hour I was just bored and irritated and nothing had happened. The characters were doing and saying stupid things and I was just like, this is not for me, this is not for me. And absolutely I can get behind people enjoying such things. I just don't think I do. To be honest, nothing else really comes to mind. As I said, I wouldn't really just write off a person without giving it a go first, so I don't know. I can't think of anything that I wouldn't read outright. Except maybe autobiographies of really awful people. I probably wouldn't want to give them my money. Question 10. If you were going to write a book, what would it be about? So I have had a novel idea around in my head since I was 16, which is now 12 and a half years, and I haven't written it yet. It has had many a reiteration, it has had a lot of thought gone into it, it has had a few first 5 chapters written multiple times. As over the years, as I've grown and changed as a person, the idea has morphed and developed, but there has been some recent rekindling of inspiration for said project, and hopefully as the reincarnation of myself that I am now, I might be able to start writing it again. There's not even a draft 0 yet, it's not even fully fledged as a concept, but I will drip feed you some key words if you would like, of types of things that might be influencing me. Mother Nature, witches, paganism, weaving, magic. How exciting! Thank you so much for listening to my ramblings about all of these books. Fantastic. I will link all the books I've just talked about in the description. Thank you Elmo for tagging me once again. This was such a lovely palette cleanser. Just do a really little sit down chatty video. Such old school YouTube. I'm here for it. I think I'll do more.